Good afternoon and welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier, and I'm deeply grateful that you stopped by. Macro thoughts: ECB's Draghi says the euro area growth momentum has slowed markedly, more than we had previously anticipated, he said. Euro dollar, this is a chart from Charlie Robertson at Renaissance. Since 1975, I remember that low below 80 at 0.795, but it looks as if it went all the way down to 0.60. We're currently at 10090, and I think we're going back to parity. Asked whether digital technologies could help avoid the backstop, Michel Barnier said he was ready to look at alternative arrangements for the Irish border to see how we could find decentralized or virtual solutions, he said. Objectively, there are possibilities, he said, but added, I don't know how to inspect a cow with virtual methods, which I thought was rather witty. 5th of August, I looked at this whole thing, Boris Johnson, the pound, and I headlined it, What's Your Road Man? That link is on Rich Wrap-Ups, and I stand by what I said in that article, notwithstanding the fact that we're some ways down the road. I think we're headed out, and that's without a doubt. And I know we're waiting for the court decision today, but I expect the court to take a step back and not to seek to interfere in what is a political issue. No breakthrough, no breakdown, no time to lose, said Donald Tusk when he met with Boris. The marketeer, Brexit markets are recalibrating the tails. And Bloomberg for pound traders, court ruling will be a tremor, not an earthquake. The pound was last 124.34. I think the pound is headed lower. I think all the pound shorts were washed out. We went all the way up to like 125.80 or 85, and I think some algorithm cleared everybody basically, and therefore I think the path of least resistance is lower. Home thoughts, Greta Thunberg, very powerful intervention yesterday at Lungu. The eyes of all future generations are on you. Tells world leaders at a UN climate summit they are not mature enough to tell it like it is on climate change, adding young people will never forgive them if they fail to act. And she completely froze President Trump. Have a look at this clip from MRVNDN. And then there's another clip that's come out which is longer. She was actually blocked as he entered the room. And that explains some of her facial reactions, I think. The sun was going down quickly and the cheetah was on the ridge. We drove to a lower angel angle to capture this image of the silhouette against the sunset. Silhouette taken by William Chua, beautiful photograph. One of my favorite books from many years ago was A Hero of Our Time by Mikhail Lermontov. He, in his madness, prays for storms and dreams that storms will bring him peace. I like this photograph, Andy Lee, and then I was reading some Arthur Rimbaud last night, who was a great French poet. I'm not going to read the bit in French. Okay, let me try. Les feux à la pluie du vent de diamants jetés par le cœur terrestre et éternellement carbonisé pour nous. The fires in the torrent of diamonds thrown up by the earth's core, perpetually carbonized for us. Here, water, pluie, fire, feu, carbonisé, air, vent, and earth, le cœur terrestre, are fused to register an experience of the eternal. And then in translation, I'll just read you snippets from another poem which is on the website, The Drunken Boat. As I guided on a river I could not control, no longer guided by the bargeman's ropes, they were captured by howling Indians who nailed them naked to coloured posts. I cared no more for other boats or cargoes, Flemish wheat or English cottons. All were gone when my bargeman could no longer haul me. I forgot about everything and drifted on. Amid the fury of the loudly chopping tides, last winter, deaf as a child's dark night, ah, how I raced, and the drifting peninsulas have never known such conquering delight. Sweeter than apples to a child, its pungent edge, the wash of green water on my shell of pine, anchor and rudder went drifting away. Now I drift through the poem of the sea, this gruel of stars mirrors the Milky Way, devours green azures, ecstatic flotsam, drowned men, pale and thoughtful, sometimes adrift by. I know how lightning split the sky apart, I know the surf and water spouts, and evenings fall. I've seen the dawn arisen like a flock of doves. I've seen what men have only dreamed they saw. I dreamed of green nights and glittering snow, slow kisses rising in the eyes of the sea, unknown liquids flowing the blue and yellow, stirring of phosphorescent melody. Glaciers, silver suns, waves of pearl, fiery skies, giant serpents stranded where lice consumed them, falling in the depths of dark gulfs from contorted trees bathed in black perfume. I wanted to show children these fishes shining in the blue wave, the golden fish that sing. A froth of flowers cradled my wanderings, and delicate winds tossed me on their wings. Now I, a little lost boat in swirling debris, tossed by the storm into the birdless upper air, shaking at the sound of monsters roaring. I have seen archipelagos in the stars, feverish skies where I was free to roam. Are these bottomless nights your exiled nests, swarm of golden birds, O strength to come? It's a beautiful poem. Political Reflections, Lungu, in my view, has to rank with the UK Parliament as the best live TV going. POTUS Trump met with Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Hello Houston, I'm thrilled to be in the beautiful state of Texas with one of America's greatest and most loyal friends. Howdy Modi. China, why Taiwan is unfinished business for Xi Jinping. On October the 1st, an array of tanks, missiles and soldiers will roll through Beijing to celebrate the communist victory in the Chinese Civil War, one of the great conflicts of the 20th century. Ahead of the Soviet-style parade, party and military leaders have drummed up talk of their historic mission, while trying to diffuse protests by millions of people in Hong Kong. Looming behind the drama on the streets of Hong Kong is the question of Taiwan, often viewed as the most likely trigger for any clash between Chinese and US forces. All summer, red and white propaganda banners hanging across Beijing have displayed a quote from Mr. Xi: "Don't forget the original intention, stick to the mission." Facing intense challenges both domestically and overseas, including in Hong Kong, Taiwan, and with the US, Xi's original intention slogan, is an attempted battle cry for political unity and perseverance, says Jude Blanchette. In a 2016 speech marking the anniversary of the Communist Party's founding in 1921, Xi told party members, "Don't forget the original intention, press forward." They warn of black hands behind the unrest and accuse the US of orchestrating the mayhem to undermine the Communist Party. Looming over the crisis in Hong Kong is the question of Taiwan. After Mao declared victory in mainland China in October 1949, KMT leader Chiang Kai-shek installed himself on the island of Taiwan, a former Japanese colony. He was backed by the US. The armed stalemate has outlasted the Cold War, but the balance of power shifted. Taiwan, once a nation tiger, is now dwarfed by mainland China, the world's second largest economy. That begs the question of what Mr. Xi means by his mission. He means the invasion of Taiwan. From Beijing's perspective, Taiwan is the unfinished part of the Civil War, and thus it must be concluded for Xi to make China great again. Xi believes in this historic mission. Has floated one country, two systems, the political formula that is disintegrating in Hong Kong, as a path towards integrating Taiwan into an enlarged People's Republic of China, evoking his family's divided history during past overtures towards Taiwan. Whenever the KMT governs Taiwan, relations with China calm down. Ahead of the election, Beijing has lured more of Taipei's few remaining diplomatic allies, the Solomon Islands, I think, was the latest one, and banned independent travel to the island. Xi believes in the CCP as a righteous force in Chinese history, says Mr. Tory Diani, one that is on the right side of history. In this photograph, Xi Jinping is a boy on the left with his brother Xi Jinping and father Xi Zongzun, 1958, Alani. As I've said before, the frontier from Xinjiang to Kashmir, from Gaza to Crimea, from Hong Kong to Taiwan, are 21st century flashpoints. I also said it's not possible to Xinjiang Hong Kong, I think. Neither is it possible to Xinjiang Taiwan either. 27th of May, I said in one fell swoop, President Xi Jinping was president for life. He is on a pedestal, and he is faced with the strongman conundrum, being the one decider. It means that his political brand will not permit a retreat, let alone a surrender. And then I quoted this from Frederick Wu, who said, if there is a decoupling between the two economies, so be it. The Chinese people can endure more pain than the spoiled and hubristic Americans. And then I'd also written about how China is fending off Trump, a flare-up on its periphery, and is set to mark its anniversary on October the 1st, and that the tinderbox that is the periphery. And I was writing about that in 2013, when I think there was an intention to turn Xinjiang into China's Afghanistan, which they blocked by this digital dystopia they've created there. Let's move on to the currency markets. 109.87 euro. We're doing a lot of work around here. Dollar index 98.659. Japanese yen 107.57. Swiss franc 0.9905. The pound 124.35. The Australian dollar 0.6776. Indian rupee 70.8398. South Korean won 11.9497. The Rial 4.163, the Egyptian pound quite resilient 16.31, and the South African rand 14.8723. This is a longer term dollar index chart. We're currently at 98.648. The trend is your friend. It's a grind, I know, but the direction of travel is set. Euro dollar, this chart is from JS Blockland. We're currently at 109.90. We've been here for about 24 hours. Thomas Cook filed for bankruptcy after the bailout talks failed. This is an image of the CDS. Apparently a lot of people made money. I missed it completely, which I wish I hadn't done because I've thought about this before. Hervé characterized it a Schumpeterian outcome, about which I wrote in an article called The Age of Disruption. Schumpeter spoke of creative destruction, in German schöpferische Zerstörung, sometimes known as Schumpeter's Gale, which is a concept in economics that speaks to a process of industrial mutation that incessantly revolutionizes the economic structure from within, incessantly destroying the old one, incessantly creating a new one. And in that article I was saying I also learned that 29% of UK retail sales are now transacted online and the direction of travel remains online. My article over the weekend was called Streaming Dreams, Non-Linearity, Crude Oil and Netflix. I quoted the Houthi spokesman who was referencing Dubai and Abu Dhabi, and he said, if you want peace and security for your facilities and towers made of glass that cannot withstand one drone, then leave Yemen alone. And that kept streaming into my consciousness. And I was thinking to myself about what sort of discount should be applied to the Burj Khalifa, because frankly, and this is the important point, I place more credibility on the utterances of the Houthis than their adversaries. I touched on William Golding's marvellous book called The Spire, and from there I flipped back further to 201, the Twin Towers, the Buddha that was blown up by Mullah Omar's people, the Shah of Shahs and his overthrow in 1979, and I said that this is a peacock throne moment, I thought, for the House of Saud. And then I touched on Netflix, about which I'm very bullish, because I think most of the analysis is around the US market, whereas this is an international business. Netflix, a temporary sentiment low, asks the marketeer. I did a short YouTube video of the article, which you can watch if you're interested in watching it instead of listening to it. And then the marketeer again, Netflix canary or the mean reversion trade. And what I was saying, it is the mean reversion trade. Interesting article in oilprice.com, why the Saudis are lying about their oil production, which goes back to that point I was making about taking the Houthis at the word rather than the Saudis. Saudi Arabia's comments about its hydrocarbons industry have long been regarded by industry experts as being as believable as China's comments about its economic growth. The Saudi statements may not contain any direct falsehoods as such, but nor are they entirely being fulsome with the truth. Richard Mallinson, saying that lack of real understanding that senior Saudi officials seem to have on how the oil market works. I used to think the Saudis thought all of us oil traders were idiots with all the rubbish they used to come out with and thought we'd believe, but recently it's occurred to me that they genuinely don't know anything about the oil industry, so they don't understand that other people actually do know what they're talking about. And this has also been one of the reasons for the constant delaying of the Aramco sale, by the way. The kingdom, this is Prince Abdul Aziz bin Salman, said that the kingdom plans to restore its production capacity to 11 million barrels per day by the end of September, and recover its full capacity of 12 million barrels per day 2 months later. It was extremely telling that he spoke of capacity and later of supply to the market, as these are terms that Saudi tends to use in order to avoid talking about actual production, as capacity and supply are not the same thing at all as actual production at the wellheads. A hefty pinch of salt, mountainous in the case of its capacity and corollary spare capacity figures. The country has stated for decades that it has spare capacity of between 2 to 2.5 million barrels per day, implying, given actual production during virtually all of this time, averaging less than 10 million barrels per day, implying total production capacity of between 12 and 12.5 million barrels per day. This level, though, or anywhere near it, has never been even remotely tested, with the highest production ever recorded being just over 11 million barrels per day in November last year. If the Saudis had anything near 12 million barrels per day capacity, that would have been the time to pump it. But all it managed was just under 10 million, with 10.5 million managed for just 1 month over the 2-year period 2014 to 2016, when the Saudis were trying to crush the shale producers before they reversed the strategy. Many serious oil market players now do not believe that the Saudis have anywhere near 2 million barrels per day of spare capacity, as it would imply production of 12 million barrels per day plus. Instead, many now believe that the Saudis have sustainable spare capacity of no more than around 0.5 to 1 million barrels per day. Specifically, a number of customers of Saudi's Arab Light and Arab Extra Light grades, the grades most affected by the recent attacks, had been offered Saudi's Arab Medium or Arab Heavy as substitutes. The other measure that Saudi is taking, which it has vehemently denied, but oilprice.com can confirm from various oil trading sources and from sources in the Iraq Oil Ministry, is looking to buy Iraq oil grades, which are close to the key export grades that Saudi ships to various destinations, including Asia. Aramco Trading Company has been aggressively checking prices and lot sizes for Iraqi crude with various oil trading houses since the attacks, and are looking for shorter term, potentially rolling contracts. It may well be, and this is what I think is the truth, that Saudi Arabia ends up boosting the bank accounts of the very people that it thinks was behind the attacks on its own oil infrastructure, the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, through its various oil industry associated businesses, by buying Iranian oil, albeit with the stickers changed on the barrels. So they're buying the oil from Iraq, where Iran is putting it. This is just extraordinary. The dastardly Persians are selling their oil via the kingdom. This is so Sun Tzu, it's mind-bending Jedi level. President Rouhani is seen in this photograph arriving at JFK Airport. And this goes back to my article which I wrote on the 16th of September, where I was writing about the drone strikes deep inside the kingdom, and I was quoting Thomas Pynchon in Bleeding Edge, who said, no matter how the official narrative of this turns out, these are the places we should be looking, not in newspapers or television, but at the margins, graffiti, uncontrolled utterances, bad dreamers who sleep in public and scream in their sleep. I said then, events in Saudi Arabia had been interpreted every which way, and allow me to try and interpret the events outside the echo chamber, that is the Saudi-paid PR machine, and the reflexive Pompeo Iranians under the bed standard response. And I was saying, worrying for the kingdom is the second scenario, which I believe, where these drones might have been launched within the kingdom, which would be signaling that the Houthis might well have teamed up with the Saudi Shia, who represent 20% of the total population and a majority in the eastern province where this oil is, and whose leaders have been characterized as apostates, beheaded and crucified. And I said the much commented on orb is of no help now. And therefore I was saying Saudi comment is worthless, irrelevant and paid for. And actually I was writing on the Sunday before we had that huge spike, and I said, look, if you get this big price spike, which you're going to get, then you get a retracement, and if we're within 10% of the price preceding these events, I think it's a buy. I'm not buying it for this near term, I'm looking for next year. Because near term we can have Trump dump oil in the market, push the price down, but over the medium term it's not going to be possible. Patrick Coburn, the Saudi Arabia drone attacks have changed global warfare. Devastating attack on Saudi oil facilities by drones and missiles not only transforms the balance of military power in the Middle East, but marks a change in the nature of warfare globally. Saudis spending $67.6 billion on their defense budget last year. Vastly expensive aircraft, air defense systems notably failed to stop the attack. US defense budget $750 billion a year, intelligence budget $85 billion a year, but the US forces in the Gulf did not know what was happening until it was all over. Excuses advanced for this failure include the drones flying too low to be detected and unfairly coming from a direction different from the one they might have been expected. Such explanations sound pathetic when set against the proud boasts of the arms manufacturers and military commanders about the effectiveness of their weapons systems. Over-focus on responsibility diverts attention from a much more important development. A middle-ranking power like Iran, under sanctions and with limited resources and expertise, acting alone or through allies, has inflicted crippling damage on theoretically much better armed Saudi Arabia, which is supposedly defended by the US, the world's greatest military superpower. What happened before can happen again. Not for nothing has Iran been called a drone superpower. Oil production facilities and the desalination plants providing much of the fresh water in Saudi Arabia are conveniently concentrated targets for drones and small missiles. The strikes on Saudi Arabia provide a clear strategic warning that the US era of air supremacy in the Gulf and the near US monopoly on precision strike capability is rapidly fading. Similar turning points in military history have occurred when the deployment of an easily produced weapon suddenly checkmates the use of a more complicated one. The most significant feature of the broken drone and missile parts was that in full working order, the weapons that had just rocked the world economy could not have cost a lot. Going by past precedent, the air chiefs and arms manufacturers will fight to their last breath for grossly inflated budgets to purchase weapons of dubious utility in a real war. It is unthinkable that American, British and Saudi military chiefs will accept that they command expensive, technically advanced forces that are obsolete in practice. The Japanese, soon after they demonstrated at Pearl Harbor the vulnerability of battleships, commissioned the world's largest battleship, the Yamato, which fired its guns only once and was sunk in 1945 by US torpedo aircraft and bombers operating from aircraft carriers. So, that's the point. Oil volatility went from 35 pre-Saudi attacks to 50 last Monday and is now back to post-Saudi attack lows of 38. Therefore, this is an interesting time to be looking at the trade that I'm proposing. WTI crude oil, this is last trading at $58.10. My perspective is, as I've told you, is to look into 2020 and to get long. Gold, last trading at $15.2350. Copper continues following the US 10-year yield, and this is a big problem for President Lungu in Zambia, who's seeking to nationalize Agawal's copper mines. The problem with this strategy is that the price of copper is getting hammered. And therefore there aren't many options. Sub-Saharan Africa oil contributes under 9% of the African economy, while agriculture is 23%, Aliko Dangote. Sudan's Prime Minister will ask the World Bank for $2 billion in support. I take you back to the last time I wrote about Sudan, on the 10th of June. I said, I was quoting Hugh Masekela, who says, I want to be there when the people start to turn it around. And I said, Sudan is a Masekela pivot moment. The zeitgeist of the revolution in Khartoum was intoxicating. As I watched events unfold, it felt like Sudan was a portal into a whole new normal. Emerson Mnangagwa has just received an award for preaching peace, unity and development. From ZANU-PF members in the diaspora, you've got to watch this. My point is, when I was writing the obituary for President Mugabe, I said Emerson Mnangagwa, who was eulogizing Mugabe as a revolutionary icon, has failed and is frankly as untenable as his erstwhile mentor. South Africa is selling $5 billion of Eurobonds split between a 10-year tranche yielding 4.85% and a 30-year at 5.75%. South African all-share up 5.47% year-to-date. Dollar rand will last at 14.87. Egyptian pound resilient at 16.31. Egypt's status as an emerging market darling is under threat after anti-government protests over the weekend, as per Paul Wallace. EGX 30 is up 5.5% year-to-date. Nigeria, which also has the continent's largest gas reserves and ranks 9th globally, consumed an average of 3,713 megawatts of electricity from the grid in 2018. That's about a tenth of what Eskom South Africa makes available in South Africa. I wrote about Nigeria at the time of the election. I was quoting Ben Okri, "We dream of a new politics that will renew the world. Under their weary, suspicious gaze, there's always a new way, a better way that's not been tried before." Nigeria, I think it's now 4 years that the economy's been in reverse on a per capita basis. Nigerian all shares down 12% year-to-date. Under President Buhari, it's retreated 50% in dollar terms and is the worst performing stock market in the world. Ghana Stock Exchange is down 10.73% year-to-date. The cool new thing in French haute cuisine, Madagascar caviar. This is Lake Mantassoa, perfect for caviar, he says, lining up the tiny grey orbs against a ruler. Have we really good eggs? We have great colour. Floating fish laboratories like this one are common in Russia or Iran, around the Caspian Sea. But this is Lake Mantassoa, a hydropower reservoir in the highlands of Madagascar at an altitude of 1,400 meters. It is Africa's first and so far only caviar farm. World's 4th highest rate of chronic malnutrition, Madagascar is an unlikely source for a luxury food that fetches upwards of 700 euros per kilogram in plush French restaurants. Parisian friends are eating not only their words but also the subtle flavours of Madagascar's newest delicacy, the Rovar caviar brand. The global caviar market is projected to grow 7% per year to around $560 million by 2025. Discoloured eggs are removed with tweezers. A salt mixture produced according to a jealously guarded recipe is added, and the final product is decanted into cans. Around 6 months later, the precious granules are repackaged for export. Beneath the grey-green waters in 2 of the ponds are 1,500 highly prized beluga sturgeon, which when they start to mature in 2026 will carry a payload each worth $86,600 at current prices. An even more exclusive fish lurks beneath the surface of another pond, a rare albino sturgeon. Their creamy rose sells for $34,500 per kilogram. This caviar is very subtle in the mouth, it's buttery, he says. Plating up 6 of his own caviar recipes, replete with vodka jelly, maize cream, artistic smears of sauce, fumes of smoked cocoa, and edible flowers. This is a link to Rova Caviar Madagascar, le premier caviar africain dans l'océan Indien. The baobab tree is the national tree of Madagascar, of course. 9 species, 6 species of which live in Madagascar. The average inhabitant in Madagascar is not richer than the average inhabitant in Madagascar was in the 1950s. I learned that from Eric Solheim at Mindspeak. Kenya, Central Bank of Kenya, this is their press release on yesterday's Monetary Policy Committee where they left rates unchanged. Business Daily's reporting Japan has loosened its purse strings, increasing loans to Kenya by 162% over the last year as China begins to slow on its lending to African states. The two countries, Japan is talking of the Indo-Pacific Passage, identifies Kenya as a frontal state facing the Indian Ocean. And I take you back to Abe Shinzo, who came here for TCAD and said, and I was in the room, Japan bears the responsibility of fostering the confluence of the Pacific and the Indian Oceans. Remittance inflows for August was at $214 million, coming off the previous month, which was $224 million. This is a problem. This is a photograph I took of the Congo Mosque Beach and the baobabs that are there. Kenya shilling 1 at 3.85, Nairobi all share up 3.47% year to date, NSE 20 down 14.15% year to date. Thank you for stopping by.